Good morning. Good morning and good afternoon. Perhaps even good evening, wherever people are logging in from. And I'm Marie Cheney, and I am the acting CEO for a small organization called Ed to Work. And I'm happy to be here with a wonderful group of panelists to this session called Creating Community Without the Classroom: Lessons from Leaders in Higher Education. This is being co-sponsored by Packback, which we will tell you more about in a few minutes, and the League for Innovation in the Community College. And first, we have their wonderful executive director, Dr. Rufus Glasper, here to welcome all of you. Rufus?
Thank you very much, Marie, and welcome. It's a pleasure to be on this panel, and it's also a pleasure to co-host this activity. One of the things that I've been involved in over these past 21 months or so is this whole realization, at least in my mind, that there is a paradigm shift in higher education. And as I'm contemplating this opportunity for change, I'm looking at the activities that our colleges are involved in, that our students are engaged, and online activities, as you well know, has surged and ebbed and pivoted in many different directions. I believe that the programming and the opportunity to be on this webinar today and to listen from our colleagues regarding how they're looking at creating this community without the classroom, I think is an opportunity for us to embrace change, embrace a new platform, and also the changing role of faculty. So I ask you to think about your individual institution, your position, those in your institution who are struggling with trying to embrace this opportunity for change, and look at this as a potential solution, a potential opportunity to engage in a broader conversation, and also to bring back a new and different innovative idea and approach to support both your faculty and your students. And with that, I look forward to the programming today, and we welcome any of your comments and any of your thoughts. And Maria, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Glasper. And my apologies, I didn't mean to demote you. You are the president and CEO of the League. So you're always first in our hearts and minds, and the right title needs to go with you. So let's move on to our terrific group of panelists. We're going to be working, and I'm going to have these folks introduce themselves in just a minute. Michael Medlock is from Rio Salado, Dr. Shannon McCarty, Bay Path University, and Dr. Allison Reif from the University of Arizona Global Campus. But before we jump into our panelists, what I wanted to do is talk a little bit about why we are doing this session. We did this once before at the Online Learning Consortium conference recently, and it was it was on a day when there weren't very many folks left at the conference, but we still had a really great small group, and we all had such a good time with the discussion and the information that was being shared that we really thought it would be good to do it for a broader audience. And so we are happy that there are so many people who signed up for this today. I think we use the word community awfully loosely. And so what I wanted to do is help us focus on what is it that we're trying to do in online education when we say that we want to form a community. We talk about community of inquiry, we talk about a learning community, but what does that really mean? What does it look like? And the reason why this is so important, it's always been important, but after COVID, I think we crave community. I know I do, and the more I talk to colleagues and friends, the more I'm hearing that we just don't have the same kind of, getting together with people. And so in the ways that we can form community truly, whether it's online or face-to-face, I think it's really good to get down and dig into it. I found two really interesting articles on what are the antecedents or the driving factors behind community. It doesn't happen just by accident. There's an article from a positive psychology field that talks about community as a group of people who have a shared identity, a shared purpose, common objectives, shared interests, and common behaviors. And some of those, of course, I think any of us would have listed, but I was really fascinated by common behaviors and how much do we think about that as instructors in the online classroom, that we all have a similar set of behaviors. I mean, honestly, I've been teaching online for a very long time, and mostly I'm just hoping people show up every week and say something. We have to do better than that. There was an article in Medium in 2018 by a person named Brian Palaya, and he was trying to really define what it takes to have community in a community development kind of context. And I found this fascinating too. So again, purpose-driven, we're getting this idea that you have to have a shared purpose and be driven by that purpose. But the focus in the community has to be on that purpose and on the members. You can't just form it and sort of forget about it. You've got to really pay attention. And you need to use the right tools and strategies. And now I think we're getting to the meat and the heart of what we're going to be talking about today. I like to say, I don't like to, but I think it's pretty common if you've taught online for a long time. Sometimes it's hard to know exactly how to lead an online discussion. And I find myself teaching people, teaching my students how to actually post solid responses and how to actually engage with one another, instead of what many of us have gotten used to, which is post an answer to a question and then respond to two others. And you end up with the same response, slightly different wording, and then a lot of, I really like what you said, Shannon. That was great. I agree 100%. And Michael, I really love the way you talked about it because I hadn't thought about it that way. And you could tell they're almost word counting. I'm not sure it leads to more critical thinking. And so again, we have to do better. But two other things that he pointed out, and that is that the members of this community need to be involved. They need to participate, and those members have to be empowered. And I think sometimes we don't empower our students enough because we really haven't helped them learn how to have these good discussions. Whether it's face-to-face or online, we like to pretend we know how to have a good discussion, but unless you really think it through or have the right tools and strategies, it might be really hard to. And so I think these are really important because a lot of these principles underlie this technology that we're going to be talking about called Packback. And as we move into it, I want to also just give you a very brief overview of what Packback really does. When I first heard that term, I was confused because it should sound like backpack, right? But it's not. And so I wasn't really sure what it was all about. And then the first time I heard about it, that it was this artificial intelligence technology that would help students actually learn to do better in their online discussions. And look, you can use it in a face-to-face course with an online component. You can use it in a fully online course. But I really thought faculty would hate it. Having been a faculty member and having worked with a lot of faculty, we don't want technology to take over what we do, right? But as I came to find out, Packback has really worked with faculty since the very, very beginning. And faculty, this is actually a great assistance to faculty. What it does is to help students actually learn in real time how to post from a very inquiry-driven perspective. So being curious about what your classmates are posting and asking deep questions. The Packback technology or software guides students to do that. And they can actually learn to do better as they're writing their post and responding to one another. It also helps them write better. There's a built-in kind of smart editor, which I think is worth its weight in gold just for that. And then what the faculty can do is set up good questions, add other questions, and then there's a nice dashboard that helps the faculty members see who's really on top of things, who's deeply into it, and who might need a little more help. So rather than replacing faculty. It's really a way to help augment your power really as a faculty member, because you can focus your time and energy on students that might need your help more. So without further ado, and now you know what we're going to be talking about, I would like the panelists to just go across. We'll start with Michael, and introduce yourselves and what you do and how you're related to Packback.
Thank you, Dr. Cheney. Greetings, everybody. On behalf of Real Subtle College leadership and the Real community, thank you for joining us today. I'm Michael Medlock, the Associate Dean of Instructional Design and Technology, and I've been at Real since 2007. In my current role, I have the privilege of working with Real faculty chairs, instructional designers, and our instructional media and course production teams to design and deliver Real's online and hybrid courses.
Great. Shannon.
Hi, everybody. Dr. Shannon McCarty. I am the Vice President of Academic Affairs at Bay Path University. I've been at Bay Path for about 4 months. So previous to Bay Path, I was at National University. And this is where I had the opportunity to work with Packback and integrate the technology into 4 of our programs. So I'm excited to talk with all of you today.
And Allison.
Hi there, I'm Dr. Allison Reed, and I am a faculty member at the University of Arizona Global Campus. We are piloting Packback in 2 of our very largest programs, and I oversee 3 of those programs. They share courses, so that sounded confusing, but we have it in 2 courses over multiple programs. And so I had the opportunity to redevelop a course to have it more accessible to Packback and get to teach that course now and see how it's going.
Terrific. Thank you. And we're going to hear more specific examples from each of these panelists as we move forward. Okay, here we go. As we said, Packback uses AI to auto-monitor and moderate the student discussion. It literally coaches, it's an intelligent tutor and coaches the students, and it amplifies the impact of instructor feedback because you get all kinds of help with the data behind all of it. And the other thing, there's many things about Packback that I think all of us are really impressed by. And one of those is their commitment to really doing good research on outcomes when you use Packback. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about that as well. Many of the folks here have done some of that research, and you find that there's greater interest and often greater learning when Packback is used. So let's talk about the pandemic and some changes and challenges during the pandemic. So I wanted to ask these folks this question, which is, how can, these are institutions that have already focused on online learning. But how can online first institutions provide a model for improving learning in general at more traditional institutions? And haven't we flipped the power sources here, because it used to be that we were kind of the online second best, and now schools are looking to the online first institutions to see how they can do better. So how can we do that?
So I'll go ahead and take and start the discussion here. One of the things that I think happened early on when the idea and that first push for online courses happened, what feels like so long time ago, is that people just naturally tried to put online what was happening in the classroom. And the traditional discussion board has lingered as long as anything else, I think, that came from that transition from the in-person classroom to online. If you think about, for a lot of us, for me for sure, going back to when I was doing my undergraduate, even in high school, class was about the teacher asking questions and then just waiting for answers, and then hoping that students would build on the answers that other students would provide. And so that seems to have lingered for a long time in the online space with the traditional discussion board. What I think has happened because of the pandemic and because of technology, some things have come together to kind of speed up that movement back full circle, leveraging technology and what we're learning here online to be able to be used even in a traditional classroom, even if you don't have the technology or a computer available. So while Rio's been predominantly online for nearly 2 decades, our hybrid and in-person offerings have grown over time, especially recently. And then once the pandemic became reality and all of our in-person gatherings were shut down, a few things impacted us the most. And when I say us, I mean my teams in general, but online Rio overall. First, as part of a larger system, we started receiving lots of requests for guidance and best practices, even from sister colleges. But most importantly, though, we immediately needed to support our own hybrid and in-person courses regarding technical implementation and even best practices for instruction. So almost as an emergency, our district created 2 new course delivery modalities, which created some layers of work, and they call them hybrid online and live online. And that was to really mitigate that the in-person classes couldn't happen, but we could quickly facilitate the same kinds of courses online. So we essentially replaced the synchronous in-person meetings to synchronous online meetings, a lot of Zoom, that kind of thing. So what I think is happening is that the pandemic and that emergency kind of movement to online for traditional courses has caused folks who weren't necessarily relying on or living in the learning management system and all of the educational technology that goes with it to become exposed to it first, but then learn of the benefits, the efficiencies that it allows, and all of that. And part of that then becomes using the discussion board, and the nature of the discussion board and that idea of classroom discussions then can be impacted in a positive way by utilizing a platform like Packback.
Sorry, what do the others think?
Oh, sorry. No, I was going to jump in, but I wasn't sure. So I think, Michael, all fantastic points. And, one of the things that I've always loved about being an online first institution is really the idea that you put the student kind of in the center. And so as you're creating those, your models and your courses, you're thinking, what is the information that students are going to need to be successful? And so even if you are teaching in a face-to-face classroom, one of benefit to have students have access to resources, even when they're away from the classroom. So it's really that opportunity to create this strong structure where students have access to resources, questions, their peers, their assignments, and it's all available kind of in one little online space. So it doesn't matter if they have to travel to a traditional classroom or if they're, 1,000 miles away in a different country or a different state. They always have access to those important resources. And so I think it's really something that even traditional institutions can adopt. And I hope that one of the things that I think that the pandemic taught us is that moving into like the online space, that students really enjoy, both still like connecting, but they also really enjoy having access to those resources. It's something that if you have your introverted students or students that need additional time to think or reflect, all of that is there for them. And so it's never like impeding their progress because they have access to all of that. And then I always love the thought of, we really like, if you think about andragogy and teaching adults, and the tenets of teaching adults is bringing in their personal experience into the classroom. And so when you think about flipping that, you're not just, directing information, you're allowing students to learn content. They have opportunity to apply that content to their own lives and then bring that back into the discussions and into your traditional classrooms. So a lot of good kind of learning opportunities, both through the pandemic, but then also I think from online first institutions.
I share some very similar sentiments as Shannon. I think often we also kind of pick at ourselves a little too much and think about how the grass is always greener. So it was refreshing for me to stop and think about what online first institutions have done specifically during the pandemic, and really kind of paved the way for some other institutions to be more flexible in their learning. One thing that comes to mind in the ways in which we can create a classroom community is to do it in a very safe manner. So in typical lectures, it might have been how you were taught. I know it was how I was taught as a child. It's very teacher centric. I would lecture at you. I would ask the questions, and those responding typically were the loudest people in the room. And week after week, we would see those same people raising their hands, and you'd kind of do the looking over to see who's behind them. But it was hard to hear from all the people in the room. And it's not that those who aren't the first responders, so to say, aren't prepared. It's that the exchange can be kind of troublesome for some people. So with the online discussion, specifically when I think about Packback and the way they approach online discussions, is we get to hear from everybody and rather than just hearing from the loudest ones. People are provided with the time to process their thinking and formulate their responses. They get an opportunity to connect the content of the course to their own personal schema and experiences. And the greatest thing about this is it's the students that are driving this, not the instructors. It's coming from their own personal experiences. We have our students post an introduction, and one of my students in a course with Packback said, I'm really looking forward to this class because I want to grow in my confidence. I want to be more confident in the classroom so that I can be a good teacher. And the funny thing was, when I looked at the Packback discussion forum, she was on fire. She was all over the place. She was responding to so many different students, but she finally got the opportunity to really soar in the way that she could do it and feel comfortable. And I think that's a really great thing for people. I'm an extrovert. I'm one of the loudest people in the room. And so I have to remind myself to think about how other people approach learning. And I think Packback has definitely made that more equitable.
So if I were going to summarize, I would say that what I'm hearing from you all is that online first institutions have, because they've been at it, and those are the institutions I've worked in the past, they've always been more about student first and sort of designing the learning experience for the optimization of learning for students. And a colleague of mine just said something to me the other day, which I think is so important to remember, that a really well-designed, high-quality learning experience is very different from just going online quickly in 2 weeks because of COVID. So if any of you have just done it quickly, you had to, but don't assume that that's the way good online education occurs. I think we have a big learning curve as we go forward. Let's move on. Let's see. Okay, technology as institutional support. Remember, good communities, you have to have the right strategies and tools. So as leaders in online learning, how do you decide which technologies are worth investing in? Who wants to start?
I think I'm going to start with this one, and have definitely lived this life of, and I like to call it the shiny new toy. And we have all been distracted by the latest, greatest technology. It's the cool new toy that we all need to have. And so there's always an intended impact. And perhaps sometimes we get that shiny new toy and it doesn't deliver on all the promises. So really, truly, one of the things that implemented a previous institution was really thinking through, how do we create a process to evaluate these technologies, and really adopted kind of a design thinking approach. So really putting the stakeholder at the end of that, and what impact will this technology have on the stakeholder? And then what's the return on investment? What's the goal or intended goal of the use of that technology? Is it an improvement in student success? Is it an improvement in efficiencies? Is it an improvement in the learning experience? So really making sure that that's very clearly identified and setting some really clear goals and metrics of how you'll measure the success of that technology. And then from there, you can often probably start with, if you'd like to pilot or bring in other resources to determine, if the user experience, is it easy to use? What's the user interface look like? And then I think another aspect that is often forgot is who's going to manage that technology once it is adopted, and what does that look like, both from a student perspective and a faculty perspective. So making sure that it is as integrated and as seamless as possible is also really an important aspect of adopting a technology. So when I had the opportunity to engage with Packback, did a really deep dive, learned all about the technology, and it really just hit on all of those key pieces for us. And so we did an early pilot with 4 programs for 4 different courses, but had those really strong metrics and goals. And then we're able to do kind of a short term, let's see what this looks like. Is it easy for everybody to use? What's the transition for our faculty and for our students before doing like a full on investment? So always encourage individuals and institutions, if you are thinking about, make sure that you have kind of what is that rationale for the adoption, and then really some clear criteria of why you would want to adopt it. One of the things I often hear from institutions is we are high tech. And I'd love to push back on that, because I don't think it's about being high tech. I think it's about the right tech. Because if you are just high tech and everybody is just constantly on technology, is it making a better learning experience? So always just making sure that you have your student at the center of those questions. One of the key things we've always done before investing in technology. But love to hear more from my panelists.
Yeah. What are your experiences?
I can follow up with that. And I love shiny things and I love to shop, but my university is smart enough to know that I should not be connected to those things. Shopping can be my personal time, but as a faculty member, I'm not really privy to the choosing of those technologies, but I do get to provide my feedback and talk about the worth of something. And like Shannon was saying, in one of the benefits of being online only, I think, is that we research everything. We have all of a course is created with course learning outcomes. Those course learning outcomes are tied to our program learning outcomes, which are tied to our institutional learning outcomes. In every course, we can go in and specifically find where students are meeting those outcomes. And the great thing about Packback, Shannon was talking about the ease of use and whether or not it's easy for the faculty, but as well as the students. Packback has done an incredible job of making it seamless. Our students actually exit out of Canvas and enter into Packback separately. And surprisingly, we haven't lost a single student over that, which, clicking a link is sometimes where we lose students, and we haven't had that. We've also provided feedback while we're running our pilot to Packback, and immediately changes are being made. And I think that's something that really sets Packback apart from other places. Lots of people want you to buy what they have, but they don't want to adjust to you. And that is simply not the case with Packback. And so for us, if we're going to choose a new technology, there has to be a strong benefit to make it worth us investing in it. And for us, it boils down to the student experience. Our students are our clients, and we need to serve them by helping them get to their end product, which is graduation and the successful entrance into a job market, or maybe that step up in a market they're already involved in. And anyone who is working in higher education knows that this is not an easy feat. But there is a lot of research out there that shows that students are more likely to retain information that they can connect to their own personal experiences. If they're actively constructing knowledge rather than being that tabula rasa, that blank slate where we just dump information into their head, they're much more likely to participate, and retention grows. And then you see them continuing to the next course, and then they're completing their degree program and they're going on to graduate. And Marie, when you started, you talked about an article about student success means being involved and it means being empowered. And I think that is so true. And it's something I've seen with Packback that really has kind of gone to the core of me as an educator. Our students are actively involved. They are critically thinking. They're coming up with questions that are related to the content for the week that are at such a different level than I would have ever guessed them to create. And we'll show you some a little bit later in our talk here. But I'm really amazed by what they're able to produce, and in a way that I would have not thought of. They're coming at it from their own experience. I teach early childhood education, so those are birth through age 8. I have 2 ex-Marines in my course right now who have 0 experience working with children beyond their own children, and one of them has 5, so he has some good experience. But the fact that he is able to make powerful connections between learning theory of teaching young children and working with young Marines tells me that something really good is happening here. And I think in a normal discussion forum, he'd see people talking about their own experiences at daycares and preschools, and it would make them shut down because they don't have those similar experiences. But with Packback, the questions they're able to pose make them an equal member of the conversation. And I think that's truly amazing.
That's great. Michael, do you do anything different from what we heard from the other two panelists in terms of looking at new technologies?
No, I think there's a common thread there of being very careful and vetting that technology. At Rio, ideas and demonstrations and any of those can come from just about anywhere. Typically, it'll come from faculty, but it can come from other places. Those of us who are in online know that when a technology is adopted, it's not a one-person show. That at Rio especially, it takes a village to really implement a new platform or a new technology, and that's in everybody's mind with our systems thinking. One of the things that stands out to me that maybe we haven't talked about yet is kind of the messaging that comes from the vendor when there's a new technology that they propose. And it takes a lot of discussions with Packback to realize just how complex and cool the technology is behind the scenes. But it's a very simple message up front about how it flips the idea of the discussions going from being instructor-centered to student-centered, where an instructor now does a prompt instead of asks the question, and then the students ask the questions, and it just blossoms from there. So the message that Packback has early on when they present that, whether it's brand new to somebody at Rio or talking to somebody new here who's being onboarded to utilize Packback, it's a very clear underlying framework as far as the pedagogy and the message that in the end, it's higher level thinking, it's more robust discussion among the students. And after some intense planning up front, it really takes pressure off of the instructor having to manage discussions or just fall into that trap of the transactional back and forth in a traditional discussion board, to really focusing on helping things to blossom even further within those discussions.
Yeah, if there's a theme here, it is to have a process to vet it. But I also heard, Shannon, you said something that I completely agree with, which is you really need to understand and drive your learning model and your learning experience. Too many universities or colleges don't really know what their learning model is. It's like, well, faculty do what they always do. And I think as we get larger and online goes to scale, you really have to have a pretty central, a kind of general idea that everybody buys into about how does learning occur and how are we going to set this up so that students can learn. And then it's much easier to vet the technology. If you don't have that, then you're constantly looking at technology and not sure why you would even adopt it other than it's really cool. So let's move on to the next one. This is about creating community through that online discussion. Now, you've all had experience implementing Packback successfully. So how has inquiry-based discussion impacted the ability to create community, which goes back to, my beginning comments. So who'd like to start?
I'll go ahead and start. And I do have to preface, I'm thinking about community in a bigger sense, not just the classroom community where our students are interacting. My background is in education and K through 12 education, and our students that I'm specifically working with are going into early childhood education. So I think about the community as their professional community. So working with other early childhood educators. And one thing that I've really found through using Packback is that we're modeling for them through our own teaching as instructors ways that they should be interacting with their students when they go out into the world and have their little children's students. So use of multiple students I know is confusing, but we found that our students in other courses didn't understand what an open-ended question was. They struggled with that. We'd ask in their lesson plans for them to formulate some open-ended questions, and they really couldn't figure out what that meant. And it's amazing to me how fast that happens when they're using Packback, because their first question needs to be an open-ended question. And if it's not, the AI will catch it and it'll let them know that it's a closed-ended question. But it's a tool that they're able to use that they can then use in their future career. The Socratic method, we're questioning things and coming up with critical thinking in a new way. And to me, that's really important, because if we can't model to them how they should be in their futures, we haven't done our job correctly. And this using Packback is so much better than that transactional, okay, I did this, check it off the list, let's move on. They're really posing high level critical thinking questions that is connected to the content as well as their lives, and engaging in conversation that as an instructor, you know, like you don't hear a lot of instructors walking around going, gee, I can't wait to read my discussion responses. You know, it's not usually the highlight of our days. It's usually a lot of, great, I agree. And with Packback, I am genuinely excited to open up my forum each day and see what's been added, see what I can pin to the top to draw students in to answer and respond. So not only is it benefiting our students, but as an instructor, it really helps me to love what I do and have some more passion behind that, which makes everyone's community a little bit better.
Thanks, Allison. I really want to get to some of the data and outcomes. So Shannon or Michael, if you have anything to add to this, how you might have seen increased community, feel free, but let's keep it to like 30 seconds. No, can we move on? We'll move on. Okay, so I wanted to give you a quote from one of the students, which is pretty phenomenal in some of the research. There is freedom to discuss a variety of course themes and concepts. This is from a student. Usually the professor provides the questions to deepen understanding on the part of the students. However, the answers would usually be generic and fluff. Packback's scoring system, coupled with the freedom to ask what we want, has definitely had a positive impact. Even the way the student answered this is not your typical kind of response, I think, from students. So it gives you another sense of why students like this so much. And I want to get to some of these outcomes. And I believe this is data that Shannon, you collected at National. So take it away.
All right, correct. So, and just a little background, as I mentioned, it was 4 programs that we started with for the pilot. Each program implemented Packback within 4 different courses. And so from January to April of 2021, these were rolling in their courses and we were collecting data from the students. So approximately 300 students enrolled in those courses. So about a 48% response rate, so fairly ideal, but overwhelmingly, you know, the students always wanted to see this continued across their program. So really great responses from our students, even as well as our faculty. I don't think we have a slide from the faculty members, but same thing. They were a little hesitant to begin with, but once they got the hang of it, once it was in the course, they really want to have Packback integrated into their next online course. So really excited to see this actually based on this result. And I believe there's one more slide or an example of what a student said. So over 70% agreed or strongly agreed that they really learn more using Packback than the traditional online discussion post. And again, one of the other things that we heard from students or actually saw from the data is we were leveraging Blackboard discussion posts, and students were responding like 75 words, let's say, and it was over 150 words were their kind of common responses and initial postings. And this is an example. So you get it, they're talking about self-directed learning and they have a resource, and it's very impressive just the level of engagement that increased from our students. So really proud of the results. Now moving from 4 programs to 12 additional programs that are going to be implementing Packback across many of those courses. So it was a very positive experience for us.
Great. So let's move on now to audience Q&A, because I know you probably all have a lot of questions. So if you have a question, put it in the chat and I will make sure that I read it, and we'll have the the team respond. So who's got a question? Because if not, I'm going to have to ask some questions and, you know, I'd rather have yours. There's a question here about, can you show what some of the tools look like? And I don't know if that's possible, but I think what I'd recommend is that if you'd like to see, the Packback folks are not hard salespeople. So if you'd like to have a look at it, they'd be very happy to just walk you through it. And that's really what I'd recommend. So here's a question for the panelists. How often do you read and evaluate student responses?
I can jump in with that one. So one of the great things about this is that I am no longer necessarily evaluating in the sense of grading. One of the things that amazes me about Packback is I set the expectations that I want my students to meet. So for example, they get curiosity scores based on the content that they've used, their open-endedness of their question, if they've cited a source. There's multiple elements, but for us, we chose that they needed a curiosity score of 50. So if in their first post, they have a curiosity score of 50, and then we decided that they needed to respond to 2 peers to get full credit, then if they did that and responded to 2 peers, they would receive full credit. I can always change that if I feel like there's an issue. I haven't ever had to change it. And the great thing is the last time I was given data, my students were at an 87 curiosity score. So we asked of them a 50, and they are that high above what we've asked, which tells you that something good is happening. For us, we do weekly discussions. Our courses are 5 or 6 weeks. So they have one question they're posing each week with 2 peer responses. And then the grading automatically transfers from Packback into, we use Canvas, into my Canvas grading booklet. So grade book. So it has taken that responsibility of the instructor, not only to interact, I'm interacting in the form, but now I'm no longer grading it, which saves a lot of time, and it frees me up to give better feedback in their written assignments and other things in the course, which I think is really helpful for students.
And Allison, if I could add, one of the things we saw during the pilot is a lot of instructors were very early on during like week 1, very heavily involved and responding. And then over time, their participation started to kind of like, decrease. And it really is because the students were driving the conversation. And so the instructor kind of took a back seat. They're still watching, they're still monitoring, they're nudging or highlighting certain conversations, but they didn't have to drive the conversation any longer because students were really owning it. And it was like this natural kind of community that was created, and students really kind of dove into the experience. And then we had a different setting. So we still had our instructors grading, but that was what was really nice with the flexibility. So it did allow for instructors that wanted to still evaluate, or you could leverage the technology itself. So just to add to that.
So just let me interrupt and say that those of you who want to see more about Packback, you can go to their website. There are videos and you can set up a demo. So that would be the way to take a look at it. No hard sell. But there were 2 questions here, and I think I'd like to separate them. And I think they're really great questions worth an answer. How do you prevent the propagation of misinformation in these particular types of discussions? Is there any kind of I'll add to it, is there any kind of an accuracy score? How do you know that what they're doing is actually accurate and they're not just taking it from Facebook?
There is a plagiarism checker built into it. So that really helps to decrease that. And then I will say, as our university has used online discussion forums for a while, you can go to any place you want and purchase what some student has already used in a discussion forum, unfortunately, and it kills me. But with Packback, it's almost takes out the need to copy because it's coming from your own experience. As someone who would grade discussions in a typical discussion forum, you see the same answers over and over again, whether they're worded differently or not. It's not a lot of creative thinking happening, but with the way the students are coming up with their own questions, you definitely see greater variation in what students are asking. And then gaming the system, I think the AI is counteracting them gaming the system, which is wonderful.
So when you say gaming this, like, okay, if I'm a smart student, can't I just keep, typing, and it'll give me a good curiosity score if I just ask enough questions? Or is there some real content there?
That also has to include the content. And I think that's one of the benefits of leveraging the artificial intelligence. So I think if you've ever used Grammarly, and it's helping you write like good, strong sentences and leverage proper grammar, etc. But the AI is actually, it's not like you could just go in and throw a bunch of words together. It actually is kind of like facilitating what you are doing and helping you elevate. And it's the same kind of technology that is leveraged with Packback. So it's not just doing curiosity score, it's actually looking at some of the content that the students are adding as well. So I think that misinformation is part of it. It also has technology to highlight if there are any kind of posts that maybe the instructor needs to follow up or look at, or might have used inappropriate language. So lots of kind of opportunities and checks behind the scenes. So still an important aspect for the instructor to be present and kind of following, but lots of technology opportunities to catch it.
So I can't, as a student, I can't just go on and start saying things about the vaccines that might or might not be true. And I won't, take a side, but because I might not cut and paste it, but I might be reading sources and even citing them, but they're not really accurate. They don't really look at the science, for example. So would you say that the faculty member still kind of has to go in and take a look? I mean, we're not just saying faculty go away, this is automatic pilot, right?
Right. So what I think Packback has done is they've taken a complex AI on the background to provide support for the student in the moment to ask a valid question based on the content matched with the instructor oversight. So it's not removing the instructor. It allows the instructor to focus more on highlighting exemplars. In fact, the AI will point out for the instructor the top 5 responses or questions that a student provides based on the algorithm and the curiosity scores. So an instructor can highlight those. So they're using positive reinforcement, and those posts all occur after a student is typing in real time, getting feedback from the system about not just spelling and grammar kind of stuff, but it will screen for inappropriate phrases, inappropriate words, and it will flag the student and just give them a heads up. So rather than something that's punitive, it pops up for them to make a suggestion to at least think about what they're typing, and and make a student think about whether they really want to post that. And because it's not scoring high enough on the curiosity score, the grammar is poor, or the content is questionable. Now, it's not an automatic fact checker and go out on the web to make sure that the students are just telling the truth every time, but it's the main point that I would make with feedback from my faculty is that it's a solid match between instructor oversight and the use of technology to help those students create those robust questions.
So until another question comes up, can you tell us what goes into the curiosity score? What creates a high curiosity score?
This is where I get on email and I go right to my Packback contact, and they answer me immediately about the complex part of how that happens.
Sure.
But they explain it very clearly, though, in a way that that folks can understand.
I would imagine it's on the website. I'm going to go look because,
Yes.
I know about this, but I haven't really gotten the definition of it. I would imagine some other folks are probably interested in that too. Because, you know, like.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I have a bulleted list just from my own notes about what goes into a curiosity score. And this
Great.
is not all of them. And Packback provides best practices too about how often to require students to post questions, how often, what percent of the overall grade the discussions should make for the course, all of that. So Packback provides support for all of that. But for the curiosity score itself, it's looking at things like the structure of the response, word count, citations, readability, formatting, and those are the ones that just come to my mind from the notes that I've taken from the previous work talking with the Packback folks.
And yeah, Ariam posted a place where you can all go read about it.
Yeah, I was going to add, it's funny, some of our students have talked about how they're really drawn in by how visually appealing it is, and they love a good discussion board or a good online chat system, and it kind of looks like a chat system. But I find, even as a faculty member, when I respond to students, it's running my response through the same system, and it'll tell you roughly, your percentage. So you're going to score between a 70 and 100 curiosity points for your post. And I'll sit there and be like, what can I cite? I want to add to my points. I need to increase it. Or it'll tell me that I'm writing in too long of paragraphs and to break up my writing, which is a great thing to remind me, because I know my students will get lost in that amount of text as well. So it not only is helping our students in the moment, but I'd say it helps instructors just as much.
It's really interesting. What other questions? Again, I have another one until we get someone from the audience. So some of the, Shannon, I don't know if you know the answer to this, but some of the students, a very small number, said, I don't want to do Packback again. Do you have any inkling of what they didn't like about it? I have a hypothesis, but go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going to say, I bet your hypothesis is going to align with what I'm going to state. And it's interesting. And from like teaching high school to community college to university level, I really think it's almost what you become accustomed to. So now, instead of becoming passive learners, we are asking them to take ownership and be active learners. And depending on what their previous experience has been, that's a shift for a lot of our students. And so instead of just being like, what am I curious about? What do I want to learn more about? How do I engage with my peers? How do I think critically? It sometimes can be a little bit easier to be like, oh, so there's a question. I just create a really quick response, add my citation, and I'm done. So I think it was a shift for some students. That was the biggest thing. They liked the format of the Blackboard discussion, which is not, I'm not sure if that's possible, but that was what one of the statements was. So I really think it was a shift of putting them at the center of the curiosity.
Yeah, that would be my hypothesis too, that once you've got that system down, and if you're a pretty bright you can get it done pretty quickly. You might not be learning much, but you can get it done, and the checks are there.
Exactly.
Any other questions from the audience? The Packback model, this is from Michael. The Packback model has helped Rio solve the discussion board dilemma for students at different points in a course and even across sections. What does that mean?
So at Rio Salado, when we first determined what the model of delivery would be for our online students, we determined that we wanted to make it as flexible as possible. And that meant that students could register and begin classes, almost all of our online classes, almost any Monday. And so we fill sections on a rolling basis. So the first Monday, an instructor might have 8 students in a section, the next Monday, 4 more, until it fills. And so it is most common, in fact, for an instructor to have students at different points in a course in the same section of a course. So there's a couple of things that the Packback model addresses here. Besides all the positives we've already talked about. And it's much more of a practical matter at Rio. So over time, we've tried to find that solution for a discussion board in our model, knowing that students are at different points of a course, because in my experience, all the times I've been a student, and up until now, most discussion boards are focused on topics in a lesson or for a week, and it wouldn't apply to every student every week. So creating this community of inquiry allows the instructor to create prompts that transcend a lesson. So they might focus on the competencies of a course instead of the objectives of a lesson. And that allows students to be involved and to be part of the discussion, regardless of where they happen to be in the course. The flexibility of the community means that we can set up a community for a single course, and then we can go beyond that. So we've set up a community that is for groups, for a group of courses within a discipline. So then you have students that are at different points in a single course, but then you also have students at different points in other courses, all part of the same community and able to be part of the discussion, provide their own open-ended questions, and still participate in a way that's meaningful, and it addresses the competencies for the course or the program.
Interesting. So we have time for one more question, and it's a good one. Now that you've used Packback, are there any scenarios where you would choose the LMS's discussion board instead?
This is a great one. And so I think I have taught in pretty much I'm pretty sure I've taught in every LMS that exists, unless it's proprietary. So doing this a long time. Interestingly enough, I think if I was trying to create, and I'm thinking of a course I'm teaching right now, where students literally are like sharing their videos and reflecting and doing self-reflection. I do not see that would work as well on Packback unless that self-reflection was added to the video component. But if I just am asking students to show up in a video, then it would be probably best utilized through a regular LMS. So something perhaps that could be on the horizon for Packback. But for now, any other instance, I would definitely send discussion through Packback.
Yeah, I would just think of ways that if there was only the need for the discussion board to be transactional, then maybe the traditional discussion board. But this idea of higher level thinking, creating a community, leveraging social learning, and all of those benefits of Packback, the traditional discussion board doesn't do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think when we were thinking about this, we kept asking ourselves, but what if the students don't get the content, because we can't ask them specific questions about it? And we found that they're incorporating the content in a way that is just much more creative and higher thought process. But if there was something that you had to ensure students were grasping in something you would have in a discussion forum, I would just say, well, that could be a quiz, that could be a different sort of check for understanding than a traditional discussion.
Yeah, that's a really good point that we'll end with. I think, again, I'd go back to know what your outcome is. What are you trying to accomplish? And if you just want them to memorize something or just be able to spit something back, which, look, there's an important time for that, just do an assessment, do a quiz or something. But if you really want high level discussion, then Packback is a good feature for that. So thank you. Well, I want to thank all of our panelists and all of you who tuned in for an hour. And Dr. Glasper, thank you, and Packback and the League. And it's been our pleasure. And we hope that you are all going to have a great rest of your week. Thank you so much.